I'm Chris Grandison. Welcome to my channel, Xenogenesis, where I apply evolutionary psychology to Black community issues. In this video, I compiled the parts of the Black Masculinity series that discuss the pressure and consequences of Black men choosing or rejecting to behave in a submissive manner in professional or social environments. A lot of us have mentioned in the comments over the past several weeks that we didn't know research had been done on this issue. So I want to start by sharing some of that research with you. This 2005 study examined interracial social interactions, and it found that Blacks were practicing what they termed compensatory strategies. And I've put in brackets there, submissiveness. So they were practicing this submissiveness in their interactions with white people. They were, at least they believed in the study, they were compensating for the negative image of Blackness they believe is held in the minds of whites by behaving particularly positively. This submissive behavior was about portraying more positive social skills, smiling a lot, being very receptive in how you talk to them or listen to them talk, seeming really engaged, being open and positive with your nonverbal gestures, compliant, overly agreeable, put a bit higher tone in your voice, because when it's deeper, that implicitly implies, dominance, and it can give off an uncomfortable feeling from Black people in terms of when Black people have deep voices, it's just part of that formidable perception of Black men. And subdued body language is, just don't have these wide, expansive, forceful gestures when you're talking, because if that goes along with the stereotypes that are already in their mind, and let's say you haven't taken that bass out of your voice, there's something else going on in their minds when they hear that deep voice and they see the body moving that way and you're not smiling and so on. So when you don't put together that submissive profile, as you see here, it can lead to them feeling uncomfortable. And when Blacks behaved in that submissive way towards them, it was found that whites may leave the interaction feeling comfortable about inter-ethnic interactions. So in a way, the behavior is adaptive. Imagine if these are white colleagues who are your equal, or some of them your superior. It can then lead to that social perception that, you're one of the good Black people, you're one of the Black people they're comfortable around, you're one of the Black people that they feel much more comfortable working with. So obviously when it comes to job evaluations, getting a raise, promotions, things like that, you want white people leaving their social interactions with you exactly as you see written here in that study. You want them feeling comfortable about relations with you as a Black person, because that positive feeling can then lead to, very positive results and outcomes for you in that environment. If it's in the corporate world or pretty much anywhere you work where, performance evaluations and raises and things like that are going to be dependent on white people in superior positions to you, but also some of them equal to you, because obviously they're going to have social conversations. And if they can just offer, nice social comments around you, that they like you, they feel good about working around you, all of this is going to help your profile in that environment. So this is why it's done, and you'd have to say it's adaptive, because when you do it, you can be advanced by the people who feel this way about you and have high positions in that company. So this is why a lot of Black people do behave in this submissive manner. Black women do it as well. I think it can be quite challenging for them also, because they have the stereotypes against them of being loud and, very pushy and assertive. And they're very sensitive to this. I've had many Black women talk to me about this, that sometimes they wanted to say something or challenge something, but because they know that stereotype of the loud, assertive, pushy Black woman is there, they can just stay restrained and not say anything, because they don't want to play into that stereotypical perception of Black people. And that kind of go along with black men as well, because if they don't behave in that submissive manner, then it can feel like you're meeting the stereotypical perceptions they have of black people, and then they can feel uncomfortable. So this is why so many, feel the need to behave this way. And it can result in you either advancing in that environment, and if you don't do it, you may find you're not going to be advanced in that company. The way they perceive you socially can then be included in how they perceive you professionally, and then that can affect your professional status in that environment. These words here are from an Associated Press story published in 2013 on NBCnews.com called "Surviving the Stressful Process of Being a Black Male." If you're a black man who doesn't smile a lot, they, whites, get really nervous, he said. There are black people I run across all the time, and they're always smiling, particularly when they're around white people. A lot of white people find that very comforting. All this takes a toll. Many black men say the daily maneuvering leaves them enraged and exhausted. For decades, they continuously self-analyze and shift, subtly dampening their personalities. Black men, especially those who look physically imposing, often have a tough time. Someone who is tall and muscular will learn to come into a meeting and sit down quickly. They're trying to lower the big barrier of resistance, one that's fear-based and born of stereotypes. Well, I would say it's more than just stereotypes. I agree, the stereotypes are part of it, but it's more. He's real, he's physical, he's right there, they can see him, and they can see the higher level of masculinity that he's broadcasting. And this man is doing everything he can to restrict, reduce, and dampen his masculinity. So what a lot of us end up doing is we smile a lot, we act in a subservient manner, we try to minimize our African physical differences to fit in and create comfort for those who are intimidated by us. We are trying to be accepted by rejecting what we are, and struggle with the conflict within us of the disrespect we are showing to ourselves by feeling we have to behave this way. Here is what happens when some black men don't behave in a submissive manner.
Every single African American we've interviewed said they had to moderate their behavior so they weren't intimidated.
I had a very candid conversation with one of the individuals who passed me this information. He broke it down. You're big, you're black, with a deep voice. You're intimidating. And if you want to move on, you have to do something about it.
This week on 60 Minutes, we reported on racial bias in the military. From the rank and file to officers, African Americans in the Air Force say they are treated differently than their white counterparts. Major Daniel Walker is an F-22 pilot. On an Air Force program called Real Talk, hosted by Lieutenant General Brad Webb, he read comments made by other black pilots.
I have a couple of quotes I want to read off.
You bet.
My fighter experience was the most demoralizing experience in my life, and I've been homeless. The second is, to be yourself and thrive in a fighter squadron as a black man is an oxymoron. Either conform or fail. These are my friends. These are my brothers. And my sisters, actually.
Walker sat down with us to share his story.
This story is not uncommon. I could very easily attribute this interaction to that action on my part. But when you compare stories from people you've never met, and they're almost identical, down to the individual and down to the comment, you start to realize these are not singular events in one person's life.
Been told what to expect at flight school?
Unfortunately, yes. We've had alumni come back, black pilots who'd gone through pilot training. The story was, you're going to go, they're going to treat you poorly. When you wash out, they're probably not going to keep you in the Air Force. So if you go, don't go trying to fly fighters. But in the grand scheme of things, probably don't go.
Did you feel your race going through the F-22 training?
Not initially. I got feedback at the end of this course, however, that it was very evident that I was having a good time and maybe I shouldn't have been, or I talked too much. I started to realize that maybe there was something more to this. Things like, if you don't assimilate, we will weed you out. Or I have to ask myself, is this a me thing or is this something else? And that takes a lot of energy to carry that question mark around with you.
After his training, Walker joined an F-22 squadron in Langley, Virginia.
Did you feel like you belonged
I did initially. I did.
initially? You
Start to hear feedback like, he's too quiet. It seems like he thinks he's too good to be here or too good for this place. And you try to be a different form of quiet, or the way he walks is intimidating.
After 11 years as an Air Force officer, Walker decided it was time to move on.
I had to really start taking seriously my happiness, my well-being, ask myself, am I willing to continue fighting uphill and chance going back to a squadron where I have to manage myself this way and sacrifice these things personally? Will I get anywhere?
Now, if you read through the comments of my last episode, you'll see a lot of black men were sharing their experiences in the comments of basically both of these situations, either feeling pressured to behave in that submissive manner or choosing not to behave in that submissive manner and seeing the discomfort it brings in others. Now, the comments I just read from you from those white men observing black men is why many black men feel pressured into submissive behavior. This fighter pilot broadcasting his high black masculinity is received by his colleagues as unforgivable, as he's being treated like he has done something wrong. Now, in effect, he has done something wrong because he has not chosen the submissive option. He did try to fit in, but he wasn't about to take that submissive position. Now, if he chose the submissive option, he would be forgiven and accepted. However, you have to understand that submission is the opposite of competition. If we don't compete, we can't succeed. And the expectation that black men continue to choose the submissive posture is maintained, and that will maintain a cultural expectation that others have for black men to continue to take the submissive route. You know, some may say these are just subjective experiences. However, black men either bending the knee or standing strong in their black masculinity, and the outcomes they face for both options has been documented in scientific research. I actually read a paper from Jim Sedanius that he published in the 90s, and I used that in my book called The Racial Hierarchy. This is the book where basically all the videos I make on my channel is based on the research I put in this book. So this is why, you know, I have so much research to offer to you guys, because I spent years doing the research to write this book about all kinds of stuff. So yeah, this study from Jim Sedanius I put in this book, and I'm going to read some of that study to you. It's a very good example of how black men can either be punished for behaving in a confident masculine way, or they can be rewarded for bending that knee and taking that submissive posture, you know, usually at work or something like that. Now, before I read the study from Jim Sedanius, I'd like to read a quote to you from the evolutionary psychologist Hector Garcia about social dominance behavior in humans. And I took this from his book called Alpha God. The play for dominance is ubiquitous. To win or maintain dominance, humans posture and attack on playgrounds, in prisons, on sports fields, in urban neighborhoods, in the corporate world, in academia, in religion, and in nearly every other social venue imaginable. As in non-human primates, posturing is witnessed by other humans who respond either by showing deference or by challenging the aggressor for position. Now, what Garcia has just explained is transpiring between men everywhere in general, every day. It's the play for dominance. Now, I'm going to read to you an excerpt from my book about this study. An analysis of how behavior among black and white Cleveland police officers either enhanced their job performance ratings or harmed them, even though they all displayed the same behavior, shows how black people are encouraged to obey the racial hierarchy and accept a submissive position and embrace their lower position in the racial hierarchy. In a study on the Cleveland Police Department, Henderson found that the correlations between superior officer ratings and peer ratings on the one hand, and personality traits such as deference and personal dominance on the other, varied significantly as a function of race. While the performance ratings of white police officers were positively correlated with the ratees' level of assertiveness and personal dominance, exactly the opposite was found with black police officers. The greater the personal deference of the black officers, the higher their performance ratings. So what you're saying there is the more submissive black men behaved, the higher white police officers rated their performance. Now, in addition, the Cleveland data indicated that while white police officers exhibiting heterosexuality, which they termed to be like manliness and being very confident, were given positive performance evaluations, black police officers showing the same behavior were given very negative performance evaluations. So the white males who behaved confidently and manly and assertively like leaders were rewarded with very good performance evaluations, and black men who behaved the exact same way were given very negative performance evaluations. This is from Sedanius's paper in 1994. So the black policemen that acted with assertiveness and personal dominance, they were the nails that stuck out. So they got hammered down. Now, if blackness is indicative of a lower social value, then this behavior from these police officers, white and black, fits in with the evolutionary expectation. We can refer to Hector Garcia's Alpha God once again to describe what is going on in this study in evolutionary terms perfectly. The outcome of status competition has a lasting impact on social animals that have a keen memory of where other members lie in the social hierarchy and of the implicit rules of their respective positions. And trust me, human beings are this ultra social animal. So the assertive black officers were not obeying these implicit rules that are expected for their position as black men in the racial social hierarchy. And the white officers knew this and responded accordingly as the hierarchy would dictate they should, which would be to maintain the social position that advantages them. Now, these are examples of what can be described as status appropriate and status inappropriate behavior based on race. Submissive behavior, so being keen to be nice, very agreeable, compliant, take that bass out your voice, have that subdued body language. That kind of submissive behavior from blacks, that's status appropriate behavior, and that's rewarded. Now, assertive, confident behavior, that's considered status inappropriate and punished. These police officers are displaying a primate male dominance hierarchy coded by skin color that is culturally learnt, a system that culturally informs us whom one should receive deference from or give it to by race. The black officers that behaved assertively and dominantly like the white officers were not treated the same. They were given very negative job performance evaluations, and a benefit was withheld from them. The power of the institution was used to restrict their status with a poor job evaluation for acting as manly and assertive as their white counterparts. The message was clear: kneel, or you will be knelt by structural violence. And if you don't learn your lesson, we can just dismiss your ass for poor capability. So whereas the white officers who behaved that way, they were rewarded and promoted, the black officers who bowed down and showed deference to white men were the ones who received very positive performance ratings, and their benefit was granted. So they can also serve as models to other black men of how to do it in the status appropriate way. So they were not being rewarded for their job performance either. They were being rewarded for how they behaved in a submissive, overly agreeable manner toward white men. In other words, they were being rewarded for cooperating with the racial hierarchical system that I call the white supremacy matrix. Now, that lecture was up on this channel, but I took it down a few months ago because I'm going to update it and improve the audio and add some new stuff to it, but it will be back on this channel maybe in a month's time or in some weeks. But the matrix, the white supremacy matrix, is the cultural construct that we all live within, especially if you're living within Western society. Now, think about what we talked about with the guy in the business meeting, who was very submissive, came in, sat down, did everything he could to diminish his masculinity. And he's doing that because, he wants to make sure and get, either a good business deal, he wants a promotion, or he just wants a good job evaluation or something like that. So this is why he's doing it. And individually, you can benefit. Now, if you recall the comment I made that this isn't about our physicality. This isn't about being stronger than some other group of people. This is about the huge social ramifications that take place in social interaction based on the perception of high black masculinity. So that man is crunching himself down in that meeting because of his high black masculinity and the social impact, the social gravity he understands that it has. And it's the same thing with the F-22 pilot. He understands what his masculinity is doing. Now, he was trying to tamp it down a little bit, but he was unwilling to take that submissive posture. And look at the social reaction, the negative psychological response he was experiencing from the other white pilots. Think about that study I talked about where they were identifying the masculine walkers as being more likely to be black male. And these are the same comments these white men were saying to him. The way he walks, it's intimidating. The research and the social experiences are just matching up very tightly in terms of what black men are experiencing. And then when we do investigate these things psychologically, we find exactly what black men are experiencing is what's actually going on in these social interactions. And the research finds that it validates these social interactions. Micronaut is asking, what is the solution for us as black men to how our masculinity impacts the social environment, and so people can end up interacting with us in ways that can be a little uncomfortable for us. Some people are uncomfortable with the threat and the fear reactions, or some people can be quite uncomfortable with the pressure to behave in a way that seems more acceptable to white people, that makes them feel more comfortable. But it involves us restricting and reducing our behavior, our cultural behavior, and our masculinity. And not everyone's comfortable with it. In fact, I had a young man here in London reach out to me after watching one of the videos. And he was in that dilemma of, in that kind of corporate environment and feeling the pressure to behave in a submissive manner, in this corporate culture, and seeing some black people do it, but he was uncomfortable doing it and wouldn't do it. And, things would be a bit awkward, and he was asking, what should he do? How should he deal with it? He does want to advance his career, but at the same time, the submissive behavior, that's not him. And obviously in the comments, a lot of men talked about having the same experience, and I had the same experience too. And my experience is I decided to leave that environment and go and work in a workforce that was much more diverse. So where there were a lot more blacks and Asians and Latinos along with white people. But when you got that greater diverse mix, there is a tendency for that culture, that cultural expectation of black men behaving in a submissive manner. That expectation was weak or not there at all. And I could just completely be myself. There wasn't that pressure to want to carry myself in a certain way, speak in a certain way, behave in that overly agreeable, submissive manner, because I was uncomfortable doing it. And there's good research that it's actually unhealthy for black people to do it. It raises your stress levels. So this increases the cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone. So your cortisol levels are high, and this is bad long-term for the body. It actually physically damages you. And it seems like the black people who have to deal with this the most are black people in the corporate world. They are the ones who seem to be interacting with white people who expect a lot of submissive behavior in that environment. And, if you don't do it, it can, just like I talked about with the Cleveland police officers who were getting either good or bad job evaluation performances based on whether they were submissive or not. The submissive ones were getting the good evaluations, and that is the same thing in the corporate world. You're going to have to make those people higher up, the decision makers. You're going to have to make them feel comfortable around you. That you're one of those black people who gets it. And not the other kind who, as far from their perspective, they see the black people who are not submissive as having a chip on their shoulder or attitude problems. They would be like, well, I get along with all these black people here, so I know I'm not racist. But this guy over here, me and him just don't get along. It's like he's got an attitude problem or whatever. And, well, maybe he does have an attitude problem, but also another option is he's not one of the submissive ones. These black folk over here are the submissive ones. And, there are other studies that show black people behaving in a submissive manner in these interactions, in those environments where they weren't calling it submissiveness, they were calling it compensatory strategies. So black people would be behaving in this very submissive manner. And when they talked to those white people who had those interactions with the submissive black people, the white people felt very good about inter-ethnic interactions. Their interactions with black people, it was very positive and nice when they were interacting with them, when they were behaving in this submissive manner. Whereas the more confident, I call them unapologetically black people. So when I wrote about this in my book, that's the section called Unapologetically Black. And that's what some black people are. They're just unapologetically black. They're not squeezing down their behavior, their culture, their masculinity. They are proudly black. And that's it. You take it or leave it. And for some white people, they can find that uncomfortable. And it can be challenging for those unapologetically black people to advance themselves in those environments. And sometimes they just have to leave, go start their own businesses or go work in more racially diverse environments and just find a better environment where they don't have to change their behavior to, fit into this culture that expects submissive behavior from black people. I mean, that's naturally going to happen because as long as these studies find that people perceive black people, they perceive blackness as just being a lower status identity, then hierarchical behavior is going to emerge. So when I talked about status appropriate and status inappropriate behavior, if you are lower in status, the status appropriate behavior that's expected from you is submissiveness to a higher status person or group of people. So this is the problem black people run into a lot. So I shared my experience with that young man on the decisions I made, and it looks like he's already decided to look into some entrepreneurial opportunities because he can't do the submissive thing, and I don't blame him. Some of us just can't do it. And I was definitely one of them. I couldn't get down with the submissive thing at all. And so I got out of those environments and went where I could just be myself because doing the submissive thing, not for me. Now, another question I saw a lot is, what solutions do you have to the social problems based on this perception of black masculinity? In terms of the interpersonal stuff, a lot of this takes place unconsciously. A lot of these responses to the physical aspects of black male masculinity, it's primal, it's instinctive. A lot of it is unconscious. So when let's say you actually talk to some people about those responses, they may have had a feeling of awkwardness and discomfort, but they're unlikely to say, it's because you're a black man and you made me feel this way or whatever. They may not actually know that. They just would have had the emotional response to you that was, there's a discomfort, a kind of awkward, negative feeling to your presence. Sometimes a feeling of threat. Sometimes it can just be a feeling of intimidation. Sometimes it's just an awareness of, black male power. And when you're in the presence of that, that aura, that feeling, it can be uncomfortable to you. I think there is a psychology behind this as well, in that if you're from a group that culturally and socially perceives itself as being a higher status group, and here you are now presented with this member of a lower status group, but then his masculinity is a bit stronger than yours. And obviously they see it on us as a group. They put it on us as a group. It's a conflict. It is a conflict, as in, you're from the higher status group. You're the socially dominant males in this nation. But in the presence of some black men, you feel physically a bit subordinate. Now, the two key words there are social and physical. Social dominance, that's that cultural dominance, that institutional dominance, that structural dominance. You've got that collective social power in that space, in that country, in that corporation, in that institution. You've got social power. And you can use that social power to do all kinds of things because you are the dominant group. So if you want to mass incarcerate a group of people, you could do that, because that would be social dominance. That's why the book is named that, Social Dominance. But from an interpersonal point of view, you can get in the presence of black males, and of course a lot of this has been culturally reinforced through what you see, through sports and things like that. So when you can be in the physical presence of black men, even though you are part of the socially dominant group, you're not feeling that physical dominance in the presence of a black male. And it can be quite challenging. You can want to go ahead and compete against that. And maybe in the next video, I'll deal with that, with how this relationship between social dominance and physical dominance, and how that psychology operates. So I'm going to end this one here, and there'll be another in the Black Masculinity series coming up soon.